People are drowning. If you're worried about the cost of rent, mortgages or food, you're not alone. Despite working harder and harder, the cost of living keeps rising and millions of people are falling further and further behind. Since Labor came to power in 2022, the cost of food is up by 10.5%, rents have gone up by 31%, and the average mortgage payment has gone up by $1,667 a month. Power bills are up, insurance costs are up, health and education costs are up, and wages are not keeping up. There's now more than 3 million people living in poverty. People who are struggling to keep their head above water are going under, pushed down by billionaires and big corporations that make massive profits, which are driving up inflation in the economy and the prices of things that everyone needs. Oxfam found that between 2020 and 2023, the wealth of the 47 richest billionaires increased by 70%. Since 2020, the wealth of the 3 richest people in this country has gone up 50%. This is cool comfort to many of those who have shivered through one of the coldest winters in recent memory in parts of the country, driven by a heat wave over Antarctica, forced to choose between heating their homes or eating, while others now, right now as we're here today, are facing 35 to 42 degree days in Northern Australia in August and are struggling to stay cool. While others struggle to pay the rent, the Big Four banks made a record $32.5 billion in the 2023 financial year. Since the pandemic, big corporations and billionaires have been making bigger profits, increasing at a faster rate than at any time in history. While people went backwards, the biggest 500 corporations made $98 billion in crisis profits off the back of the pandemic. Woolworths, Hancock Prospecting and NAB alone reaped billions of dollars in crisis profits. Coles and Woolworths have both increased their profits too, as anyone who's been to the supermarket can tell you, pocketing billions off the back of higher prices that just keep going up. Up, up, profits are up. There's no food shortage. Australia exports most of the food we grow and make here, but farmers and suppliers are being squeezed too. It's price gouging, profiteering, ripping people off. It's immoral, but under Labor, it's lawful. Big corporations are making massive profits and driving the cost of living crisis. The economy is rigged. It's been rigged by politicians from both Labor and the Liberals. It's not some natural occurrence that has rerouted the economy away from the wages of working people and into the profits of big corporations. It's been rigged by design. Right now, the share of income going to big corporations in the form of profits has never been higher, but wages are back to 2010 levels. People are angry, and they're right to be. Millions of people are being robbed, fleeced and plundered by big corporations and billionaires in a heist facilitated and enabled by the politicians from Labor and the Liberals. You're being ripped off at the supermarket, ripped off on your power bill and ripped off on your mortgage. Alan Fells held an inquiry into price gouging and found that people are paying too much, too often for the basics that they need in life. He cited submissions like those from Danielle, a nurse whose bills rose over $8,700 over 2023, while her wages only increased by $102. These big corporations reaping profits off these high prices are paying millions in donations to Labor and Liberals, and Labor and Liberals are writing laws to benefit them. We need to confront reality. The power of big corporations to push up prices at our expense is driving up everyone's cost of living. Governments have the power to do something about it, but they're choosing not to. Labor and the Liberals will not tackle the real problems that we all face. Instead, they're refusing to act or tinkering around the edges, handing out a few $100s here and there, trying to paper over the fault lines. But politics needs to do more than that. It needs to address the pressures that are causing the cracks in the first place. It needs to make life better for people. Since Labor has come to power, things have gotten a lot worse. But mark my words, we wouldn't be in a better economic place now if the Liberals were still in. They would also let big corporations gouge people. We can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. Labor has lost themselves. People tell us that it's harder and harder to tell Labor and the Liberals apart. They've betrayed everyday people by refusing to take on the big corporations' excessive profits. While people are being ripped off by the big supermarkets, the Prime Minister was just a few weeks ago posing for photos in a Coles high-vis vest. It's a level of disconnection with the realities of everyday people that everyday people are facing that echoes Scott Morrison. Not only have Labor refused to take on the big corporations and billionaires, they can't even bring themselves to point out the role that big corporations have played in causing the cost of living crisis. Earlier this year, the Greens ran a Senate inquiry into the price gouging of the major supermarkets. We found significant evidence of price gouging and the pain that this was causing people. We recommended new laws to give the government the power to break up the big two supermarkets when they were abusing their market power. A pretty standard antitrust approach when there's one or two big corporations with too much market power. An approach that the United States has had for years. However, according to the Prime Minister, such an approach was akin to Soviet Russia. And in response, he said, "We have a private sector economy." He got a Labor mate to do his own independent review, which recommended a few tinkering changes to codes of conduct, and voila, nothing changed. Groceries are still getting more expensive. We need a government who's prepared to take on the big supermarkets and deliver cheaper groceries. But instead, we have an economy, as the Prime Minister has said, which is run or rigged for the private sector or for big corporations. Under Labor, the economy is not run for people. It's not run to ensure that everyone can eat or have a roof over their heads or stay warm in winter. It's not run for students piling up debt, working multiple jobs to pay more and more rent. It's not run for the young families trying to work out how they're going to be able to afford increasing childcare fees. It's not run for people who want a safer climate. It's not run for the people on income support who are being forced to jump through humiliating hoops by job network providers to claim a pittance. And it's not run for the older women who are one bit of bad luck away from sleeping in their car. This is an economy which is run for the profits of big corporations and billionaires. Look at Labor's approach to the cost of living crisis since coming to power. Labor is using everyday people as cannon fodder in the fight against inflation, leaving all the heavy lifting to the RBA. Instead of taking on the big corporations causing the crisis, Labor believes that by letting interest rates go up, the economy slows down and down comes inflation. But the result has been billions in profits for the big banks and an incredible amount of pain for renters and mortgage holders. Labor's attempted to wash their hands of the actions of the RBA, but make no mistake, this pain that people were feeling was part of Labor's plan. Labor had a different choice. They could have adopted the Greens' three-point plan to tackle soaring inflation and the cost of living crisis. Make the big corporations' price gouging illegal and put price caps on out-of-control costs like rents. Tax the excessive profits of the big corporations and invest that money in things that people actually need, like wiping student debt, affordable housing, expanding Medicare to include mental and dental health. But that would have taken guts, leadership. But as soon as something looks hard, Labor gives up and fails to act. Instead of tackling the cause of the crisis, the greed of the billionaires and big corporations, Labor has whacked everyday people with higher rents, higher mortgages, higher food prices, higher power prices and more costs to see the doctor. To try and buy the public off, they've given people a few $100s here and there, which have been gobbled up by increasing costs. What good It's $200 off your energy bill when your rent has increased by hundreds a week or your mortgage payment has doubled. It doesn't even touch the sides. Labor has let people down. The problem is, big corporations do not pay their fair share of tax. Despite billions in revenue, 1 in 3 big corporations does not pay tax. And when it comes to coal and gas corporations, almost 2 in every 3 big corporations pays no tax. The system is rigged. Danielle, the nurse from Alan Fell's price gouging inquiry, is paying more tax than an international gas corporation. Not just one gas corporation, 33 of them. She's also paying more tax than 21 coal companies. She's paying more tax than Exxon, Santos, Virgin or Amcor. When a nurse pays more tax than a multinational, something is deeply wrong. Together, in the 10 years between 2014 and 2024, all the teachers in the country together paid twice as much tax as the entire oil and gas sector. Big corporations treat paying tax like a discretionary item. The ATO has described some big gas corporations as systemic non-payers of tax. Big gas corporations are parasitic leeches. They suck out gas, public subsidies and profits, leaving nothing but dangerous pollution and a degraded host. Sending revenue offshore and paying little, if any, tax, the gas corporations take our gas and leave very few benefits while destroying our climate and our environment. The big gas corporations rip off local gas users, households and businesses, charging international gas prices, all while consistently making up lies about a domestic gas shortage if they aren't allowed to frack whatever aquifer they want. How do they get away with it? They pay off politicians from Liberal and Labor with massive donations, undermining politics. The way the gas corporations operate, it seems like no one in this country is even shocked anymore. No one was shocked when the Resources Minister posed with Woodside Chief Meg O'Neill at the midwinter ball. No one is shocked to see Labor trample the rights of First Nations communities to push ahead with the Beetaloo Basin. Just as no one seems shocked when we see the PM posing in a Rio Tinto mining shirt. But it's a slap in the face to people who are struggling to keep their head above water. Labor, like the Liberals, is now a fully owned subsidiary of the coal and gas corporations. That's why Labor has approved 23 coal and gas projects since coming to power in the middle of a climate crisis. Housing is rigged too. The rental and housing crisis is breaking people. Across the country, millions of renters and mortgage holders are being ripped off. According to a survey by housing advocacy group Everybody's Home, 3 out of 5 people are in housing stress, paying more than 30% of their income in housing costs. For renters, it's 3/4. Housing here is amongst the most expensive in the world, and the fastest growing group of people who are becoming homeless in this country are children. Children. More and more people are sleeping in cars. Instead of having the guts to take on the problem and solve it, Labor and the Liberals are making the problem worse. They're turbocharging the increasing cost of housing by handing $176 billion in tax handouts to wealthy property investors that stop renters buying their first home. Pushing up prices, rigging the housing auctions in favour of the haves against the have-nots. Renters and first home buyers don't stand a chance. And because Labor's backing the RBA to lift interest rates, they're driving mortgage holders to the wall. We need a rent freeze, and we won't stop fighting for a rent freeze and rent caps. We've consistently been seeking to push Labor to actually tackle the crisis. But Labor can't even use the words housing crisis or rental crisis, so it's hard to know how they're going to tackle a problem that they can't even say. They say that they can't work with the states to implement a cap on rents and a rent freeze, even though they worked with the states to cap electricity bills. A rent freeze will work for people who are at risk of being evicted because their wages won't cover another $100 a week in rent. We've called for a public housing developer so that we can start building homes for people, not luxury apartments for profit. According to Labor, cheaper housing is not their job. A rent freeze is not their job. More public housing is not their job. A public developer is not their job. The Greens believe that ensuring that everyone has a home is the government's job. We can't keep relying on the developers and big corporations because they are ripping us off. At the next election, increasingly, voters will see the Greens as the party of renters, the party of first home buyers, and the party of mortgage holders. People are losing confidence in the political class because they keep saying, the political class keeps saying, that tackling these important issues that we all face isn't their job. Whether it's cost of living, the climate, or the housing crisis, people want the government to step up and deal with the structural issues which affect us all. People want outcomes that will actually make their life better, and they deserve it. Labor might want to blame the problem on things that they pretend are outside their control, and the Liberals might want to try and blame things that they find threatening, like immigration, but people see through it. It's clear that it's corporate profit that is winning the day. The government has the power to tackle the issues that we all face, they're just choosing not to. Government has the power to make price gouging illegal, to make the big corporations pay their fair share of tax, to stop new coal and gas, to freeze rents, to wipe student debts, to expand Medicare to mental and dental care, and just get on with building more public housing. Labor's hands are not tied. Instead, they've chosen a system in which millions of people are below the poverty line and millions more are sinking towards it. Poverty is a political choice. The problem is the political class. Labor and the Liberals have backed a system of government in which public assets are sold off to private interests, corporate taxes have been slashed, and billions of dollars of your money, is going to big corporations and wealthy property investors instead of the people who actually need it. They complain about a lack of engagement in politics, and they wave their hands about threats to democracy. But when there are thousands of people protesting every weekend for months against a genocide, which Labor and the Liberals have not done anything to prevent, they refuse to listen. When a Labor senator actually spoke to their concerns, she was booted from the party and called a rat. The problem is not the people, it's the political class, and people are sick of it. People want the politicians to get off their arse and act. They're sick of the posing in corporate clobber, the performative antagonism on Brekkie TV and the mealy-mouthed posing. They're sick of politicians who tell us that this is as good as it gets or to simply be more civil. People are angry. They are hurting. They don't want more civility. They need outcomes. They want change. They want someone to get into government and actually fight for them. It was bad enough before the pandemic, but now, when people are at risk of losing their homes and are struggling to feed themselves and their families, it's really offensive. What happened to leadership? What happened to vision? What happened to actually having some moral clarity and some conviction and actually solving the problems that people are facing? It's increasingly clear to people that we can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. Enough is enough. It's time to make the big corporations and billionaires pay their fair share of tax. This election, the Greens will propose a package of Robin Hood reforms. The aim is simple: to make the big corporations and billionaires pay their fair share of tax to make life better for everyone. Today, I can announce the first of these Robin Hood reforms. We're calling it a big corporations tax, and it has a number of components. The first component is targeted at big corporations who are making excessive profits beyond a normal return to shareholders. It will apply to companies with an annual turnover of over $100 million, taxing the excess profits that these companies make. This new big corporations tax would apply to both Australian corporations and multinational corporations operating in Australia. Over the next decade, this component of the tax is expected to raise $296 billion. It will provide huge amounts of much needed funding to redirect to everyday people, and it will reduce the cost of living. Two other components are the big corporations tax on the excessive profits of coal and other mining industries, and significant reform to the existing gas tax, the PRRT, so that it actually raises revenue. The last time the country tried to seriously tax the excess profits in the mining industry, these companies poured millions of dollars into advertising, forcing Labor to sack their own democratically elected Prime Minister. That doesn't mean that it was the wrong thing to do. That is exactly why it needs to be done. We can't have the mining industry determining who and who isn't running this country and who the country is run for. If Labor hadn't capitulated so spectacularly, the country would have had an extra $35 billion in revenue between 2012 and 2020. This money could have built homes, fixed teeth, or kept people out of poverty. But instead, it's been hoarded by mining corporations, hidden in offshore havens, and handed off to CEOs in mega bonuses. Big corporations across the economy have squeezed hundreds of billions of dollars out of the public since the end of the pandemic, and too much of it tax-free. Because just one of the things that we could do through a Robin Hood-style big corporations tax is to put dental into Medicare for everybody, because your teeth should be included as basic health care. Today, I also announce our policy to bring dental into Medicare and expand access to dental care for all. When the Greens were in balance of power in 2010, we secured free dental care for children. As a result, more than 43 million services have been provided to more than 3 million children. Now, as we head towards another shared power parliament, the Greens want to finish the job and get dental into Medicare for everyone. If you have a Medicare card, you should be able to go to the doctor, to go to the dentist, just like you go to the doctor, and use your Medicare card. It's critical that we expand Medicare so it covers everything for everyone, and that includes your mouth. As anyone who's ever had a toothache knows, dental care isn't optional. It's ridiculous that this doesn't already exist. We know that over 60% of Australians have delayed dental care in the last year, and the most common reason was cost, at 63%. And that's a 12% increase since the last survey. That delay seeking treatment impacts on people's lives. Another national survey found that almost a quarter avoid certain foods due to dental problems, and a third of people said they feel uncomfortable about their appearance because of their dental health. It doesn't have to be like this. We expect that putting dental into Medicare could save someone going for a simple checkup, clean and an X-ray up to $182 on a single visit. For someone getting more complex procedures on multiple teeth, they could easily save hundreds or thousands from ensuring that we put dental into Medicare. Those savings add up. We estimate that for two pensioners, they could benefit by up to $1,800 in the first year and up to $20,000 over a decade. For a family of 2 adults and 2 children, we think the savings could be even higher, at up to $2,600 in the first year and up to $29,000 over a decade. This would be meaningful change that would make a difference to people's lives. I'd like to acknowledge the work of our health spokesperson, Jordan Steele-John, and his team for leading a comprehensive Senate inquiry into how to get dental into Medicare, and for working with experts in the field to develop this important plan that I'm releasing today. It's far more important that everyone in this country has access to dental care than it is that big corporations are able to make billions of dollars of profits that they send offshore tax-free. Labor likes to take credit for Medicare, but after 40 years, they still haven't put the money where your mouth is by expanding Medicare to include dental care. We're not going to stop pushing them until they do. The Greens will make the big corporations pay more tax so that you can fix your teeth. Things have got to change. Every election, the major party's share of the vote declines. People tell us that for them it's getting harder and harder to tell Labor and the Liberals apart. Confidence in shared power parliaments is rising because they make things happen. Just this week, for example, because of the Greens sharing power, we delivered on a right to disconnect for millions of workers, especially women. At the last election, we saw more Greens and independents elected to the lower house. There's now a record number of members of parliament who aren't from one of the major parties. This is a good thing. But despite that, the political class still doesn't get it. They have mistaken a lack of interest in their own political project, self-serving major party politics, as being evidence of lack of engagement in politics full stop. People are also frustrated with traditional and social media. It's largely controlled by a bunch of white billionaires and the news is very often depressing. There's a lot of things in the world right now that are pretty hard to take in. Whether it's the fact that over 21,000 children have been murdered or separated from their families in Gaza, whether it's the greatest levels of disparity between extreme wealth and extreme poverty that we can see, or whether it's the world hurtling past 1.5 degrees of warming, driving an Antarctic heat wave, or the boiling of the Great Barrier Reef. People know the system is rigged. And in the face of this, we're seeing an increasing desire from the political and CEO class to blame those who are sick of this rigged system and who want something better in their lives. They tell them to sit down and shut up, get richer parents, work harder, or they imply that they don't understand. People are written off as woke, unrealistic, populist, or even threatening the fabric of our society. This is the political establishment trying to defend a status quo that is no longer viable. Their main strategy is to crush people's hope, to tell them that nothing more can be done other than the weak Band-Aid answers that they're dishing out. Well, it's not working. Today, young people and people of colour are leading the world's biggest movement for peace. The movement fighting against the genocide in Gaza for a free Palestine is dominated by young people and people of colour. This war has radicalised a generation who've been unable to avoid the horrors on their phone of an area 40 kilometres long and 7 kilometres wide being bombed into smithereens. The major parties also hate the climate movement so much that they're throwing peaceful protesters in jail. Our coal and gas exports cause more damage to the world than any other country bar Russia. But instead of being concerned by the big corporations making billions burning up our future, they're locking up the people who are prepared to get in the way. But the climate movement still grows. There is also a growing movement fighting for control of rents to bring down the cost of housing for all, a movement fighting for mental and dental care for all, a movement fighting for free university, TAFE, and to wipe all student debt, a movement fighting for raising income support so that no one in this wealthy country of ours lives in poverty, a movement to make price gouging from the banks, supermarkets and power corporations illegal to bring down the cost of essentials for us all, a movement for publicly owned renewable energy and an end to more coal and gas, a movement for peace, a movement for equality of all, a movement for treaty and truth. It's time to reject politics as usual. It's rigged. We need a new politics which puts people first and which tackles the big problems that we face. And this isn't just a dream. Currently, the Greens hold balance of power in the Senate. This election, we will be running the biggest campaigns in Green history to win lower house seats too. There are at least 5 new seats across the country where we believe we're in with a strong chance. In one of them, if only 300 people change their vote, the Greens could win the seat. We are confident that we can continue to hold our ground and grow. and we will be in a strong position to fight for change in the next Parliament. We know that there are millions of voters on our side. And among voters under the age of 34 years old, the Greens are now neck and neck with Liberals and Labor. Voters increasingly see the Greens as a party able to represent their material interests as well as their values. Across the country and the world, we face a series of profound interrelated crises, serious systemic issues. They cannot be solved by giving people a few $100s once a year. They will not be solved by the two major parties. People can see things are getting worse. People can feel themselves going backwards. They're rapidly losing confidence in the ability of the political class to do anything about it, but mark my words, they are deeply, deeply political. We will not let the major parties crush our hope. Here's the message that you're going to hear us repeating until election day. We can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting something to change. We know that change might not happen overnight, but nothing changes if nothing changes. If you want change, the first step is to actually vote for someone who will fight for it. If you want change, you have to vote for it. Thank you.
Authorised by J. McCall, Australian Greens, Canberra.